You walk into what's supposed to be a quick sync, and the air is already thin. HR has a folder. Your manager won't quite meet your eyes. Someone says the phrase mutual separation, as if they're handing you a mint after a long flight. You breathe once, count to 3, and keep your voice steady. Before we go further, I brought documentation, and I'll need this decision in writing. A binder slides across the table. Time-stamped emails, weekly status notes, policy printouts, and one yellow tab that says almost cheerfully, "No. Retaliation Policy." Section 4.2. HR tries a smile. The smile breaks first. Welcome to the story of how a quiet paper trail beats a loud setup. 6 weeks earlier, the reorg shuffled you to a new manager, the big vision, small calendar type who loves phrases like, "We're moving fast," which usually translates to, "We're skipping steps." KPIs jump 30% overnight without a baseline. Goals arrive verbally, just between us. One-on-ones slide off the calendar. Late-night pings show up with the subject line, "Quick favor," which means not quick and not a favor. You don't argue with weather, you build a roof. Every Friday becomes status and blockers, a short, boring, precise email that lists what's shipped, what's in progress, what's blocked, and whose name is on the lock. Every hallway request gets converted into a single confirmation line. Per our chat, I'll deliver A by Wednesday, EOD. B moves to next sprint. Confirm? 2 weeks later, your manager forgets he asked for a pivot. Your Friday recap remembers for him. You keep the tone neutral and the timeline sharp because neutral and sharp are admissible. Then on a Monday that smells like paperwork, HR pings you with a friendly face in a super casual chat. Casual arrives with a PDF called Performance Improvement Plan, no prior coaching, 3 vague bullets like demonstrate leadership energy, and a sand timer you didn't order. You don't perform outrage, you request definitions. Thanks for the draft. Before signing, could we align on objective metrics? And could you attach the policy that covers PIP criteria and the last documented feedback before this? There's a stall, then a working session. You show up with 3 pages that turn fog into numbers, a roll scope sliced into measurable tasks. What, how, by when, a matrix that translates fluff into actions. Tuesday stand-up with minutes and action items logged. Dashboard V2 by June 15th with adoption of at least 15 daily active users. And a dependencies list with actual names and dates. You read one sentence as if it's the normal thing in the world. I'm fully committed to succeeding. To avoid ambiguity, could we put these metrics and dependencies into the plan with a review every Friday at 3? HR smiles the trained smile. Your manager says sure, because it's awkward to say no to the word objective. That's how the quiet war begins. 3 Fridays in a row where you ship what you promised, annotate what you're waiting on, and nudge blockers once, then note the nudge. At 9:47 p.m., the movie tries to skip scenes with a message that says, "If V3 isn't done by Monday, we'll have to reconsider fit." Your reply lands at 9 a.m., clean and framed like a photograph. Copy. V3 requires BI data access, ticket 3127, requested Wednesday, following up. Can you approve BI priority today? The message points the camera at the lock. Your manager says yes, then never hands B the key. Friday arrives, your recap says, BI access still pending, manager approval pending. A single word with a date can cut cleaner than a sword. A coworker leans over with a whisper. Your name is on a resource plan labeled transition. They're prepping to replace you while you meet your marks. You don't sprint to anger, you walk to procedure. 2 policy PDFs drop into your evidence vault. Anti-retaliation and performance management. 2 lines get highlighted. No adverse action within 90 days of a good faith report or participation in investigations. And performance plans require documented prior feedback plus objective criteria. You call the compliance hotline, not HR compliance, and you give them only nouns and dates, the goals, the deliverables, the blockers, the tickets, and the adoption numbers. They hand you a case number. Your subject lines pick up that number like a badge. PIP progress. Week 3, case 666666. The tone doesn't change, the headers do. You book a Friday review with HR, your manager, and a neutral witness from learning and development because meetings behave better when minutes are inevitable. 15 minutes before, the invite tries to shrink into a quick sync with no witness. You arrive on time with a notebook and a sentence that keeps everything legal and honest. For accuracy, I'll be taking notes and sending a written summary after. They open with the line that sounds like a gavel. Given performance concerns, we're moving to termination for cause. Today you let the silence sit for 3 seconds, long enough for everyone to hear it. Then you ask for the only things that matter. Which objective criteria were missed? What evidence will be attached? Can we compare that to the tracker and Friday recaps? And per policy, please confirm there's no active investigation affecting this decision. Then the binder opens. Email logs, ticket timestamps, adoption above target, a plan that suddenly has your metrics printed inside it. You smile like a librarian and say, happy to continue if we can align the decision with the written record. HR blinks. The meeting pauses. You read a sentence into your notes out loud. HR has paused termination pending review of documentation. So it lives in the room. It ends not with a speech, but with minutes. If any part of this is handing you a sentence you can use this week, take a breath and remember this channel, Storyverse. We do revenge like grown-ups, receipts over rage, scripts over shouting, solutions that age well. If you want more, you know where the subscribe button lives. Back to the story. Monday brings 3 emails. Compliance opens a review and wants your tracker and Friday summaries. HR asks you not to use the case number and subjects. Your manager suggests keeping things in the team. You respond in the only order that makes sense. Compliance gets the attachments and your thanks. HR gets a polite line. I'll follow instructions from the compliance team and continue with factual updates. Your manager gets the boundary. Per policy, I'll keep our status updates in writing for accuracy. Compliance interviews partners from design and BI. The plot simplifies. Blockers weren't yours. Approvals weren't sent. Access wasn't granted. The investigator asked for the original PIP draft in the HR system. There isn't one. A template was used with no metrics. Policy kryptonite. 3 days later, the HR partner goes on leave. Your manager refocuses on strategic work, and you meet with an HR director who actually reads. They open with the cord you've been pulling this whole time. We appreciate your thorough documentation. Then they ask what you want. You don't do victory laps, you do options. Option A is to stay with a new manager, clear goals, a bump for the disruption, a transfer path in 90 days, and a neutral performance note. Option B is severance for a sane number of weeks. A neutral reference letter handed to you now with a signature, accelerated vesting up to policy limits, healthcare continuation, and a mutual promise not to throw mud. You're open to both, you say. Please send the terms in writing so you can review. The review becomes a choice. You pick time. You pick the letter now, not a promise later. 2 lines get edited politely. Eligibility for rehire is set to eligible by policy, and a sentence states that no policy violations were found in your performance. The letter arrives on letterhead. You read it into a voice memo because closure has a sound, and it's paper sliding into a folder. On your last day, the DMs feel like small lanterns. Thank you for keeping receipts. You were the only one who sent notes. I always thought those weird PIPs were normal. You don't gloat. You set your status to a green check mark and log off. The story could end there, but quiet competence has a way of traveling down hallways. A new subject line arrives, retroactive PTO blackout notice. 2 teammates, Priya from design and Marco from QA, have approved vacation on the calendar for months. One has a sibling's wedding, the other a visa appointment, tickets bought, hotel booked, coverage arranged. A week before they leave, an HR blast yanks approvals in the name of a critical freeze, with no VP sign-off, no posted notice, and no schedule for coverage. People start whispering about fairness. You start building a record. You help them gather what already exists. Workday approvals with timestamps, the team calendar with those PTO blocks visible for the whole month. Little throwaway acknowledgments like, "Enjoy the wedding," from your manager that prove awareness, and a screenshot of the intranet page that says blackout periods with a last updated date of April 2nd, which is not this week. You suggest a 4-line email, calm and precise. Please share the written rationale for the retroactive revocation, the policy link that governs blackout declarations, and the effective date when this blackout was posted to employees. I relied on the approval to book non-refundable travel. They send it. You drop a coverage plan into the calendar. Green cells show covered hours. Red cells the one gap your manager can own if he wants to be a hero. HR wobbles the way it wobbled with you. "We'll review. Please stand by." You reply, equally calm. Approvals stand until a formal reversal that cites policy. Priya and Marco will proceed as approved while you await the documents, reattaching the coverage plan for convenience. No anger, just a reminder that the rules already exist. The next morning, a VP appears in the CC line. Exceptions are granted, given timing and prior approvals. A week later, a real blackout SOP appears with lead time, approvers, and a checklist that requires the posting to be dated. That's revenge with a paperclip. Nothing explodes and everything works. Before the sigh finishes, fear arrives at a junior desk. Jamie gets an email with the words "non-compete reminder," and the floor drops an inch. They haven't signed anything new. They're interviewing after watching your PIP circus. You hand them a parachute that opens with nouns. Please send the executed non-compete you're referencing, signed by both parties, the scope, the duration, and the consideration provided at signing. While they wait, you search the policy library and find the sentence that ends most bluff letters. Non-competes apply to director level and above. Analysts sign NDA and non-solicit only. You screenshot the version history. HR sends a generic template with no signatures. Jamie replies that they've never signed the agreement, attaches the policy screenshot that says director level, asks HR to confirm there's no executed non-compete in their file, and states they'll fully honor their NDA and non-solicit obligations. The tone is cooperative and exact. If HR pokes, Jamie is ready with the second sentence. "For accuracy, please provide the specific clause you believe applies to my role with a link to the signed document in my file." There is no clause and there is no document. The reminder is withdrawn. Jamie accepts a new offer, and you quietly remind them that the NDA is a forever thing. Don't take code, don't take lists, don't take internal docs. Take your skills. Paper tigers fold when you ask for paper. The department changes shape in small ways. The HR partner who pushed your PIP fades from Slack. People Ops posts that PIP templates will now include objective metrics and weekly review slots by default. There's groaning, yes, but the kind that sounds like relief. Priya ships a design system that makes shipping easier. Marco automates smoke tests nobody wanted to run by hand. Jamie sends a goodbye line that hums for a week. "I thought I was powerless. Turns out I just needed sentences." You answer like a mantra. Keep your receipts, keep your tone, keep your time. Stories like this want to end with a door slam or a sunrise. Yours ends with a desk on day one at a new job where you quietly install 3 habits that mean you never have to tell this story again. You open a living document and write your mission in 1 sentence, then list the 5 outcomes you can measure, the people who care about those outcomes and how they're measured, and what done means in numbers, owners, and dates. You schedule a Friday status and blockers note at 3 p.m., a bi-weekly one-on-one with an agenda sent the day before, and a monthly roll-up with 3 screenshots and 1 paragraph of "so what." You make a folder called Evidence Vault, and it's the most boring folder you've ever named. Status emails exported as PDFs, screenshots of approvals on scope and dates, policy pages downloaded with their last updated stamps, and a single index doc that holds ticket numbers and permalinks. You send your manager 1 friendly line. "To keep us aligned, I'll send a short Friday status and blockers recap and keep a living role map you can comment on anytime." Managers love clarity they didn't have to write. Emails become small machines that move decisions without raising voices. "Per our conversation, I'll deliver the thing by this date. If any detail differs, please reply by tomorrow." Decision needed by Friday. Option A, ship sooner with this risk. Option B, slower with that risk. Please pick by noon to protect the timeline. Escalation for visibility as discussed. The asset was requested on this date. Ticket number here. We need it by next date to hold the ship date. Adding the leader for awareness. When policy changes are floated in chat, you ask for the link, the effective date, and the approver so you can align accordingly. When someone says a surprise plan requires twice the scope in half the time, you ask whether to drop something or extend the deadline. You attach the original confirmation so people see the path you actually agreed to walk. Meetings stop being ghosts you wish you recorded and start being pages you can point to. You begin with a sentence. The outcome today is to pick A or B and confirm an ETA. If the room drifts, you read the sentence again. You speak your notes out loud as if the future is listening. Noting that design will send icons by Wednesday EOD. B, I will grant the data set on ticket 4312. 15 minutes after the meeting, an email lands with 5 lines. Decisions, owners, dependencies with links, 1 line of risk, and the next review slot. No recordings, just decisions, written down before anyone's memory gets creative. The red flags that used to feel like fate turn into cues with counters. Verbal directives get a written confirmation. Retroactive scope changes turn into a choice. Drop one piece or move the deadline. Resource starvation gets a calm escalation with a ticket ID and a date that matters to someone whose job title contains the word risk. A surprise PIP becomes an invitation to agree on metrics and a review cadence. A HR quick sync with no agenda becomes a request for the agenda and the attendee list, and a note that you'll bring a note taker. Vague threats that sound like not a fit become questions about which objective criteria or policy clause is at issue. Rumors about replacement don't earn a confrontation. They earn a tighter log and deliveries that match the written plan. And if actions keep contradicting policy, a case with dates, links, and numbers. You practice evidence hygiene the way runners practice tying their shoes. Policy pages get saved as PDFs with their last updated date visible. Your own words, status emails, self-reviews get exported to personal storage you're allowed to use. Proprietary data never leaves the building because revenge doesn't require theft. File names start with a date, so sorting is a flick of the wrist. An index doc keeps decisions, approvals, tickets, and metrics in one quiet sentence per line. Once a quarter, you stitch 3 screenshots into 1 page and write 1 paragraph about why it mattered. When review season looms, you do what you did all year, just in one place. You send your manager a bulleted impact draft with links and ask what's missing to help their write-up. You ask 2 partners for 2 or 3 lines of concrete before and after. Your self-review uses 4 words as a spine: objective, action, evidence, impact. And every sentence plants a link. If someone tries to minimize, you answer with kindness and a request. Can we add the metric and the link for readers? It'll help calibration. There are exits in healthy companies, and there are exits from them. When it's time to go, you negotiate like an adult who knows paper is kinder than promises. Severance weeks, and when they land, a neutral reference on letterhead handed over now. The rehire flag set to eligible by policy. Healthcare continuation and vesting per policy limits. A mutual promise not to drag each other online. Any non-compete or non-solicit clarified with the executed document, if it exists. A simple dated checklist for returning equipment. Your last email thanks people for the chance to contribute and attaches a handover doc with links, owners, and next steps, because some bridges you might want to cross twice. The playbook doesn't make you invincible. It makes you legible. It doesn't make people good. It makes bad plans boring. And when someone tries to set the table for a scene you've already lived through, you'll feel it. The chair is lighter than it used to be. The room has more doors than you remember. The line you keep in your notes app, pinned above all the others, will still be true. Clarity is kind, and written clarity is career armor. If you made it this far and you're already rewriting 1 email in your head, I'm rooting for you. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of grown-up revenge. Calm, useful, and built to outlast the latest drama. I'll keep the folder open. You keep the receipts tidy. You close the laptop and think the story's over, But stories like this have a way of echoing. A few months pass. New badge, new building smell, the soft click of your name appearing in a company directory you didn't know you missed. Day one is quiet. A welcome packet, a Slack hello wave, a stack of project docs that read like someone spilled soup on a timeline. You take your time with the soup. You write your mission in one sentence, send your first Friday note at exactly 3, and tell your manager, who actually looks you in the eye, that you'll keep a living role map so there are no surprises. They say, honestly, that would help me too. It lands like a small benediction. The first real test doesn't look like a test. It's a simple handoff, a dashboard that's supposed to go live by end of month. There's a chart in the deck that can't exist without a data set nobody has, and everyone keeps saying, we'll figure it out. You smile and type a single line. For accuracy, I'll confirm the scope in writing. You send a quick note, this by that date, the other thing by the next. The data set coming from B on ticket 4481. You attach the deck, the ticket, and 2 screenshots that make the mystery look harmless. Nobody argues, people just answer with dates. The chart launches on time, not because anyone got louder, but because a sentence put its hands on the steering wheel. You notice slowly that the room gets calmer when you speak in specifics. One afternoon, a product manager you barely know leans on the doorframe and says, I've been copy-pasting your subject lines. They're working. You tell them that clarity is like a well-lit hallway. People move faster because they can see the walls. They laugh, and you can feel something shifting. Less shoulder tension, fewer calls that should have been emails, fewer emails that should have been breathing. Then you see a familiar shadow. A quick sync pops onto your calendar with no agenda, hosted by someone from People Ops who usually doesn't float into your orbit. Your stomach remembers old furniture. You reply the way you trained yourself to reply. Happy to? Could you share the agenda and who'll be attending? I'll bring a note taker. The answer comes back 5 minutes later with a real topic, a real list, and a line that makes the shadow shrink to its proper size. Nothing urgent, just a check-in on your onboarding. You bring your notes anyway. They leave with your cadence card and ask if they can share it with 2 other new hires. You nod, and the echo picks up speed. You don't make a personality out of documentation. You make a practice. You still miss deadlines sometimes. You still guess wrong on a priority. You still write last thing in a message that definitely isn't the last thing. But the misses are smaller, the guesses kinder, the last thing acknowledged with a smile instead of a sigh. Because you wrote it down before anyone had to pretend they remembered. A junior teammate, barely out of school, clutching a notebook like a flotation device, asks if they can pick your brain about all the meetings. You offer them a walk instead. On the stairs, they tell you they feel slow and loud at the same time, like they don't know when to talk or when to let things land. You hand them the smallest tool you own. Start the meeting with one line about the outcome. If it drifts, say the line again. 2 days later, they message you in all caps, "It worked," and then apologize for the caps. You tell them it's okay to celebrate the feeling of a room clicking into place. The second test lands harder. Someone on another team forwards a confusing warning about sharing external materials, and your name is in the CC list. It's not an accusation, just a chill in the air. You could let your pulse do the thinking, but you've learned not to. You write 3 sentences that fit in a pocket. Could you share the policy link you're referencing, the effective date, and the approver? I'll align accordingly. The reply arrives with a link to a page older than some of your plants. You thank them, download it as a PDF with the last updated date visible, and send the smallest correction a person can send. This version looks outdated. Here's the current one in the policy library. It allows the exact use case we discussed. I'll proceed with the current version unless you advise otherwise. The chill leaves the room. Nobody needed a speech. The rule was a light switch, and you flipped it on. Some nights, when the day has been all nouns and no music, you open the folder where you keep screenshots of quiet victories. A ticket number answered within an hour because you wrote a due date out loud. A calendar invite that went from maybe to yes because you added a line about why it mattered. A message from a designer who said, "Thanks for the recap. It made me look organized to my boss." You let yourself feel it for a second, the way competence can be contagious if you let it be seen. On a rainy Thursday, your old manager pings you from the past. The opening line is almost sweet. Hope you're well. The second line asks if you're open to a quick chat. They're moving to a new company and could use someone with your knack for alignment. You look out the window at a sky that can't decide which gray it wants to be. You type what the present version of you would have needed to hear then. Thanks for reaching out. I'm happy where I am, but here's a short write-up of the Friday cadence and the 5-line recap. It helped me, and it might help your team. You attach the doc and feel the story close a loop without reopening a wound. There's a question people ask you now, and they ask it softly, like they don't want to wake anything dangerous. Were you ever afraid? You tell them the truth. Of course you were. You were afraid in the way anyone is when a room feels rigged. But fear taught you how to count, and then counting taught you how to breathe. On July 10th, asked for access. On July 12th, followed up. On July 14th, ship date slipped because access was missing. Saying it in your head like that made the panic blink and find a chair. You tell them you're not giving legal advice because you aren't. You're giving them grammar for chaos. If you're listening to this while answering emails, you already know the part I'm going to say next. Revenge isn't the dramatic scene where someone gets tossed from a meeting. Revenge, the grown-up kind, is when a bad plan has nothing to grip. It reaches out with a vague word and grabs a metric instead. It whispers, "not a fit," and finds itself looking into a weekly summary with dates and links, and a sentence that says, "pending, design sign-off requested on the 12th." It weighs the cost of ignoring that sentence and quietly changes course. One evening you stay late, not because you have to, but because you're writing a handover for a project you're passing to a teammate who just had a baby. You list links, owners, next steps. You close your laptop and see the office differently. Chairs as things that hold people's backs, not just bodies. Whiteboards as windows you can carry. On the way out, security nods. You nod back and think about all the rooms where you've had to fight to be heard, and all the rooms where a sentence did the fighting for you. You'll make mistakes again. You'll write a subject line that reads as too sharp. You'll forget to include a link you thought you pasted. You'll take a call when you should have sent a recap. But you've built something under the mistakes, a floor made of specifics. The floor doesn't collapse just because you slipped. You can stand back up on a number, on a name, on a date you wrote down before anyone needed it. And because life is both funny and predictable, you get one more message months later from Jamie, the junior who almost got spooked out of their career by a template with no signatures. They send a photo from a new desk with a plant and a coffee mug that says, "Per policy attached." You laugh out loud, an office-appropriate laugh but still, and write back, "Keep watering both." They send a line that feels like the point of all of this. "I thought I needed courage. I needed a calendar." If this story handed you even one sentence that makes tomorrow's meeting less jagged, I'm glad you found it. If you want more stories told like this, calm, connective, practical, subscribe to Storyverse so they find you without you having to look. Either way, keep the sentences short enough to carry in your pocket, keep the dates honest enough to stand in daylight, and keep your time like it's yours. Because it is. And then life does what it always does. It hands you smaller tests dressed up as ordinary days. The first one shows up as a vendor smiling through a blurry video call. Their slide says the work is in scope. Your budget says it isn't. And somehow everyone thinks we'll reconcile later as a plan. You take a breath and choose the sentence that saved you more money than any discount code. For accuracy, I'm going to restate what's approved. You lay it out like a runway. What was signed, which milestones are funded, which change would require a written order and a new date. The vendor tries the oldest trick in consulting. Call the extra work clarification. You keep your tone gentle and point at the paper. If it's truly clarification, the dates and costs don't change. If dates and costs change, it's a change. Which is it? The call gets quiet, then honest. They send a corrected statement of work, and your team ships the part that actually exists in the world. Nobody calls it revenge, but you can feel the future breathing easier. A week later, you find a paycheck that isn't quite right. Not the kind of error that screams, just a missing sliver that steals a meal and a little faith. You don't stomp. You open the payroll system and gather the timestamps that don't care about anyone's mood. Your message is 3 sentences: what you expected, what posted, and the policy line that explains the difference. You add the ticket number in the subject because tickets behave better when they think they're being watched. Payroll replies with a real apology and a correction date. You don't print the email and tape it to your wall. You file it where quiet victories live, under the word fixed. Rumor tries to stretch its legs one afternoon when someone mistakes a shared document for a shared secret. Is this a breach? Are we in trouble? Panic wants a microphone. You hand it a checklist. Let's verify what was shared, to whom, and whether it contained protected data. You open the incident guide while everyone else opens their mouths. The facts fit on one line. Public information, wrong channel. Not a fire, not even smoke, just a window left open. You close it and send a sentence that calms a room from the inside out. No sensitive content was exposed. The link is disabled. Here's the correct channel for future posts. There's a silence where a scandal would have gone. It's the sound of a team learning the difference between drama and oxygen. Somewhere in the middle of all this, a designer hovers by your desk with a problem that looks like it has teeth. A director wants a new brand treatment on a deadline that eats weekends for lunch. You ask for the reason behind the rush. It's a board deck. Of course it is. You don't say no. You offer 2 timelines and a sentence that makes leaders choose the world they prefer. If we keep the date, we drop features A and B. If we keep all the features, we move the date. The director picks the adults-only option, drop A and B, then thanks you for making the trade-off feel like a door instead of a wall. The designer goes back to their desk a little taller. You get a Slack that says, "I'm stealing that sentence." You tell them to steal the comma too. On a Thursday so ordinary it could be a screensaver, Facilities announces an office move that has chaos printed in invisible ink on every box. Everyone promises to label their gear. Nobody does. You build a tiny inventory in 15 minutes. Names, asset tags, destination pods. Because you've learned that 15 minutes on a Tuesday can save 4 hours on a Friday when the building forgets how elevators work. The move happens without the ritual cursing you've come to expect from grown adults carrying monitors. Someone from facilities asks where you learned to do that. You point at the folder on your desktop. They smile like people do when a storm passes by and only takes a few leaves. The reorg arrives as reorgs do, with promises that sound like weather and a chart that looks like a game of musical chairs. You don't grip your seat. You write your role map like it's a resume that learned how to breathe. Mission, outcomes, stakeholders, done as a number. You schedule your one-on-one and send it in advance. Here's what I'm delivering. Here's where it lands. Here's what I'll drop if you add something new. The new director reads it and finds their own pulse slowing down. We should share this with the other teams, they say, and it lands in more inboxes than you'll ever meet faces. You didn't angle for safety. You built something that makes safety want to stand near you. Not every day bends to your sentences. There's a manager in a partner group who prefers theater to progress and CCs half the planet when they feel ignored. You don't meet volume with volume. You reply to the smallest circle that can move the work, and you keep the subject from swelling with hurt. Here's what's blocking us. Here's the ticket and date. Here's what happens if we don't flip the switch by Thursday. You keep it boring enough to be undeniable. The CC storm passes over your head and rains on someone else's weekend. You go home and make dinner like a person who knows which problems belong to them and which ones are just weather. A junior PM, cheeks still pink with the courage of their first few quarters, asks you the question that hides inside every, "Do you have a minute?" They want to know how you stay calm when the stakes feel sharp. You tell them calm isn't a mood, it's a method. Count before you speak. Translate before you argue. Ask for the link before you promise. You tell them how you whisper dates to yourself like they're beadwork, how you leave meetings with 5 lines written down before your memory can lie to you, how you end the week with 10 minutes of truth, what shipped, what slipped, what needs help. Their face does that thing hopeful faces do when they realize there are handles on the door. There's one more test, the kind that doesn't look like trouble because everyone's smiling. An exec wants a quick dashboard for tomorrow's investor call. The data pipeline is a string of fairy lights held together by hope and last quarter's grad intern. Everyone promises magic because promising magic feels like teamwork. You look at the clock and feel the shape of the room in your bones. We can show a directional preview by morning, you say, with last week's numbers clearly labeled. If you want today's numbers live, we need to drop the cohort view and push the Q&A by 20 minutes. You say it gently enough that nobody needs to pretend they're brave. The exec picks the preview. The call goes fine. You sleep like a person who didn't have to invent a time machine to impress a calendar. In the middle of ordinary wins, you catch yourself doing something you used to dream about when meetings felt like traps. You pass it on without turning it into your brand. You share the 5-line recap format in a channel where nobody owes you thanks. You drop a copy of your Friday note into a wiki and title it something so boring it will survive 6 bosses. You praise out loud in rooms where quiet is the default. When someone gives you credit, you rotate it like a chair so someone else can sit. It turns out the cleanest revenge on broken systems isn't roasting them. It's outgrowing them so loudly that even the shyest person in the room learns the melody. There's a day when your calendar is full of color and none of it feels like heat. You get through your list without skipping lunch, and your last email says, attaching the handoff, links, owners, next steps. You close the lid and see yourself the way the story wanted you to see yourself from the start. Not the hero who burned down a castle, but the architect who added exits to a building everyone thought was fine. The room is the same size it was when you walked in months ago. You just know where all the doors are. So here's the ending that isn't really an ending. Keep the sentences small enough to carry, the dates honest enough to stand in daylight, and the promises few enough to keep. When a vibe tries to take your seat, hand it a metric. When the past taps your shoulder, show it a calendar. When the room feels rigged, count. When you're afraid, breathe through the numbers out loud until fear finds a chair. If this gave you a line you'll use tomorrow, let it help someone else find theirs. You know where the button is. I'll keep the folder open, you keep the receipts tidy. So here's where we leave it. You don't need a dramatic finale, you need the same quiet moves that got you here. One clear sentence, one dated note, one small promise kept. The rooms that used to rattle now click. The meetings that used to drift now land. When someone reaches for a vibe, you hand them a metric. When the past knocks, you answer with a calendar. If this story gave you even a single line you can use tomorrow, tappy like so it finds the next person who needs it, and subscribe to Storyverse for more calm, grown-up revenge told as a clean, usable playbook. I'll keep the folder open, you keep the receipts tidy,